November 1541. Queen Catherine Howard is under house arrest in the former Syon House Abbey. Her former relationships with her music lover Henry Manox and the nobleman Francis Dereham came to light. These revelations jeopardized Catherine's marriage to Henry VIII. But they probably didn't mean her death yet. Dereham, however, named another name under torture that was to change everything: Thomas Culpeper. However, he alone did not decide Catherine's fate. This should be done in Parliament, and through the betrayal of a close servant. Culpeper served as a gentleman to King Henry VIII's privy chamber, making him one of the monarch's closest servants. He often slept in Henry's bedchamber and assisted with his dressing. Renowned for his attractiveness, Culpeper was undoubtedly one of Henry's favourites. After Culpeper's death, a London merchant wrote to a German friend alleging that 2 years prior, Culpeper had raped a park ranger's wife, a crime for which Henry pardoned him. Culpeper was also charged with murder, another issue reportedly resolved by the king. The true extent of Culpeper's guilt remains unclear. He had an older brother with the same name, often causing confusion about which Culpeper was involved in various incidents. Both brothers likely shared narcissistic and sociopathic traits. Around twice Catherine Howard's age, Culpeper met the future queen shortly after she arrived at court. They possibly shared an early affection, but Catherine ended their relationship when Henry showed interest in her. Though Culpeper moved on, Catherine sought his company again from Easter 1541. She instructed her lady-in-waiting, Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, to arrange a meeting where Catherine gave Culpeper a velvet hat, imploring him to hide it from the king. Catherine reportedly flirted with Culpeper, who did not reciprocate as desired, much to her displeasure. Gareth Russell argues in his book about Catherine Howard that this initial meeting refutes the theory that she met with Culpeper due to blackmail. Tudor podcaster Claire Ridgway suggested that lust, rather than love, drove their relationship. This view aligns with the idea that Culpeper wasn't solely seeking political favor from the Queen to avoid exposing her past, though this might have been a factor. Two additional points muddy the waters. First, opinions on their relationship vary widely. Second, there is no conclusive proof of a sexual relationship between Catherine and Culpeper during her marriage to Henry. Under torture, Culpeper denied a sexual relationship, but confessed he intended and meant to do ill with the Queen, and in likewise, the Queen so minded to do with him. As suspicion grew, Henry's men searched Culpeper's quarters and found a love letter from Catherine, revealing her deep affection for him.
I never longed so much for a thing as I do, to see you and to speak with you, the which I trust shall be shortly now. That which doth comfortly me very much when I think of it. And when I think again that you shall depart from me again, it makes my heart die to think what fortune I have, that I cannot be always in your company.
Those who believe in the blackmail theory see the letter as Catherine's attempt to appease or deceive Culpeper. Regardless of the truth, the letter implicated Catherine by mentioning Jane Boleyn, who had organized their meeting, thus drawing another person into the investigation.
My trust is always in you, that you will be as you have promised me. And in that hope, I trust upon still, praying you that you will come when my Lady Rochford is here, for then I shall be best at leisure to be at your commandment, thanking you for that you have promised me to be so good unto that poor fellow my man, which is one of the griefs that I do feel to depart from him. For then I do know no one that I dare trust to send to you, and therefore I pray you take him to be with you, that I may sometime hear from you one thing.
Jane Boleyn, the wife of Anne Boleyn's brother George, had previously turned against both her sister-in-law and her husband. Now she betrayed another queen. Lady Rochford, as she was known, heavily incriminated Queen Catherine, driven by the fear of torture. Jane left no doubt about her belief in a sexual relationship between Catherine and Thomas Culpeper. She, who had to wait outside the door when Catherine and Thomas wanted to be alone, described hearing incriminating sounds. The credibility of her account remains uncertain. The entire situation affected Lady Rochford deeply, leading to a mental breakdown even more severe than Catherine's. She never recovered from this, remaining unwell until her execution. For Catherine, the game was over. She was officially stripped of her title as Queen on November 23rd. She gave 3 confessions. Unfortunately, the first one is lost, but it is said that she was relatively open about her relationships with Francis Dereham and Henry Manox. In her subsequent confessions, Catherine altered her narrative. She insisted that Dereham had intimate relations with her against her will and denied any wedding vows she might have given him. Regarding Manox, she claimed their interactions were limited to touch. Confessions 2 and 3 offer a fascinating insight into the young queen's mental state. They are disorganized, jumping between topics and lacking thoughtful composition. For example, these sentences appear in the documents.
But as concerning the other words, that I should promise him by my faith and troth, that I would never have other husband but him, I am sure I never spake them. I do answer that there was communication in the house that we two should marry together, and some of his enemies had envy there, at wherefore he desired me to give him leave to call me wife, and that I would call him husband. And I said I was content. And so, after that, commonly he called me wife, and many times I called him husband.
It seems that Catherine was still trying to uphold what she had once promised her family before she came to court. No one should know the truth about her background. However, as her accusers gathered more and more evidence against her, she panicked. Henry foamed with anger upon hearing the results of the investigation. He allegedly grabbed a sword, intent on executing Catherine himself. Much of his rage may have been self-directed, as he had pardoned Culpeper and never inquired about his 5th wife's background. However, Henry's fury focused solely on the now deposed queen. He made no secret of his expectation for her execution. The same applied to Francis Dereham, who had openly spoken about his intentions toward the king's wife after Henry's death. Dereham's fate was sealed, as it had been high treason since July 1534 to speak of the king's death. Henry had enacted this law after a nun from Kent prophesied that he would die within a month if he left Catherine of Aragon and married Anne Boleyn. Thus, Dereham died a traitor's death on December 10th, 1541. Culpeper's life could not be spared either, but the king showed some mercy by commuting his punishment to a simple beheading. Henry Manox, however, was allowed to go free. The prosecutors ruled that he was not guilty of any crime, as Catherine was over 12 years old when he touched her, meeting the age of consent at the time. Catherine's case was exceptionally complex, sparking ongoing debates among legal historians and jurists about the legality of her conviction. Many sources suggest that a special law, the Royal Assent by Commission Act of 1541, was created to retrospectively sentence her to death. Since this act was not passed until 1542, the situation is more intricate than it appears. The act includes the Bill of Attainder for Catherine, dated January 29, 1542, meaning Parliament acted as a court and pronounced her death sentence. Notably, the text does not specify which law she allegedly broke. Here is an excerpt of the ruling based on Parliament's authority. Queen and Lady Rochford stand indicted. The indictments of such as have lately suffered are hereby approved, and the said Queen and Lady Rochford are, by authority of this Parliament, convicted and attainted of high treason, and shall suffer accordingly. Often, the Royal Assent by Commission Act is cited as condemning Catherine retroactively for not informing the King of her background. Although this was not previously punishable, the text of the Act suggests otherwise.
To avoid doubts in future, it is declared that the royal assent given by commission shall be valid in all cases hereafter, that any lightness of the Queen for the time being may be revealed to the King or his council, and that an unchaste woman marrying the King shall be guilty of high treason.
The phrase, "to avoid doubts in the future," clearly indicates a forward-looking regulation. From a purely legal standpoint, two other laws contributed to Catherine's downfall. During Anne Boleyn's time, a law made peril against the king a form of treason. Additionally, the Treason Act of 1351 included provisions relevant to her case, compassing the death of the king, queen, or their eldest son, violating the queen or the king's eldest daughter unmarried or his eldest son's wife, levying war, adhering to the king's enemies, killing the chancellor, treasurer, or judges in execution of their duty. The critical term here is violating the queen. Legal consensus holds that this includes various physical attacks, but whether simple adultery qualifies remains debated. Sir William Blackstone, an 18th century jurist, affirmed that affairs fall under this regulation. He argued that the Queen could become pregnant by another man, potentially leading the kingdom to fall to an illegitimate heir. Catherine's fate seemed predetermined, but there was a legal basis for her conviction if there was sufficient will. Jane Boleyn's situation differed. Her mental breakdown should have spared her execution. However, Parliament passed a regulation permitting it. The remainder of the Royal Assent by Commission Act is relatively mundane, allowing royal approval of a law to be given by a commission if the monarch prefers not to be personally involved. It is tragic that Catherine so vigorously denied the preliminary marriage contract with Dereham, which would have annulled her marriage to Henry and precluded conviction for an extramarital affair. However, politicians or lawyers would likely have found another way to ensure her downfall. The verdict on Catherine Howard was passed by Parliament on February 7, 1542. Still under arrest at Syon House, the deposed Queen suffered another panic attack upon learning of her impending execution. She had to be forcibly taken to the boat that would transport her to the Tower of London. On February 10, 1542, her boat passed under London Bridge, where the impaled heads of Francis Dereham and Thomas Culpeper were still displayed, slowly decaying. Imperial Ambassador Eustace Chapuys described Catherine's arrival.
The Lord Privy Seal, with a number of privy councillors and servants, went first in a great barge. Then came the Queen with 3 or 4 men, and as many ladies, in a small covered barge. Then the Duke of Suffolk in a great barge, with a company of his men.
Upon arrival, Catherine did not know when she would be executed. The date was set for February 13th at 7 o'clock in the morning. The night before, according to several reports, Catherine requested the block on which she would place her neck. This wish was granted. Catherine reportedly rehearsed for several hours on how best to position her head, likely an attempt to maintain some control in a situation where she was otherwise powerless. On the morning of her execution, Catherine was taken from her cell at 7 o'clock, but likely died around 9 o'clock, in the same place as her cousin Anne Boleyn. Businessman Otwell Johnson described the event.
I see the Queen and the Lady Rochford suffer within the tower, whose souls be with God, for they made the most godly and Christian end. Catherine uttered her lively faith in the blood of Christ only. She desired all Christian people to take regard unto her, worthy and just punishment.
Other accounts suggest Catherine was too weak and had to be supported on her way to the scaffold. Her hours of rehearsal paid off. The executioner severed her head with a single blow. Jane Boleyn, whose testimony had made all this possible, died immediately after her.